I first visited Ukraine in 2016. I remember crossing what was called the contact line back then in Mayorsk and observing people queuing, mostly elderly people queuing to cross that line. Huge queues, 2 kilometers, in the bitter cold. It was the depth of winter. I remember also visiting Donetsk and Luhansk and observing also the difficult situation of civilians in the middle of what was then a rather forgotten conflict, in which, however, people were impacted very much by the situation. So that was my first experience in the country. And of course, since February 2022, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the beginning of the huge refugee crisis, I have visited the country several times. My first impact with that phase of the crisis in a few weeks after the beginning of this phase of the war was very dramatic. I think I will never forget in my life the thousands and thousands of people that I saw crossing the Ukrainian border into Moldova, into Romania, into Poland during those days. Many women and children arriving in countries that kept their borders open and hosted them. There was a great sense of fear, of uncertainty in those initial days. But in my subsequent visits, when I could also, just a few weeks later, in fact, for the first time, enter Ukraine and visit Lviv first, and then Kyiv, and then other places near the front line, I could see another aspect of this crisis, the incredible resilience of the people of Ukraine. And I must say that the insistence of the government from the very beginning that we should certainly provide humanitarian assistance to people in need, but also and always think about recovery and eventually reconstruction was exactly the right approach that we were happy to embrace and to support. I can tell many stories of resilience that I have seen in my several visits to Ukraine. I remember the children in Kharkiv studying in underground schools, the only place where authorities could guarantee warmth and safety in the middle of winter. Perhaps to me the most vivid example or vivid experience of that resilience was meeting an elderly couple. I remember their names, Valentina and Anatoly. They lived very close to the front line in southern Ukraine, southeastern Ukraine, and their house had been completely damaged, almost destroyed by Russian strikes, but their spirit was unbroken. I remember how they took me down in the cellar where they had spent months and months to protect themselves from the war. They explained to me how they had survived, the two of them with their dog, and I was happy that we, in their case, like in many other cases, could provide at least some basic assistance to remain warm, to remain fed, to remain protected during the most difficult months of the war, especially in winter. And I saw it very clearly in my last visit. The war continues. It may be a bit less in the headlines, in the international headlines, than it was in the early months of the war. Other crises have emerged around the world that attract attention, but we must not forget that people in Ukraine are still gravely, catastrophically impacted by airstrike, by shelling, by constant air alarms that oblige them to take refuge in bunker. We should not forget that houses are destroyed, that the power installations are also damaged or devastated, causing huge problems, especially in winter. In other words, that the war continues and that humanitarian needs continue to be very urgent and need to be met. I want to take this opportunity to thank the donors, government donors, but also many private donors that have contributed to our effort and the effort of many other organizations in Ukraine. I want to thank all the countries that continue to host Ukrainian refugees. We must not give up. We must support the resilience of the Ukrainian people, also by providing humanitarian assistance, hoping that soon this can be transformed into the reconstruction of the country and a better future for the Ukrainian people.